Good morning again and good Shabbos. And welcome to everyone that's here and of course watching us. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And you may know the joke about the guy who is walking down the beach and he kicks something metal in the sand. He bends down to inspect and he realizes a Middle Eastern looking lamp at his feet. He brushes it off and there's a puff of smoke and a genie appears. "Your wish is my command," intones the genie. "Don't I get 3 wishes?" says the guy. "Don't get greedy," says the genie, "and don't be selfish either." "All right," says the guy, "listen, I've been a long-time Texans fan. My one wish is that they win the Super Bowl this year." "Are you kidding?" says the genie. "Have you seen the Texans play? Their defense is inconsistent, their coaching is unreliable, and even their offense leaves a lot to be desired. I'm only a genie. There's just so much I can do. Try a different wish." "Okay," says the guy. The Democrats and Republicans work out many of their differences and start working together for the betterment of the country. The genie thinks for a minute and says, "Do you want the Texans to win the Super Bowl by a lot or by a little?" I'm blessed to be Beth Yeshurun for many reasons, and one of which is I have an opportunity to learn from esteemed colleagues every day. But there are also other rabbis across the country and across the world that I learn from as well. And many I don't know personally. But yet through their writings and their speeches, their sermons, constantly push me in my pursuit of more learning and more Torah. I lost one of those rabbis this past Shabbat, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He was a former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, and he was an intellectual and spiritual giant. His reach extended far outside the Jewish world, often being described by world leaders across the globe, Jews and non-Jewish leaders, as their rabbi. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 2005 and made a life peer in the House of Lords in 2009. He maintained a close relationship with British prime ministers for decades. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair said in his statement that the rabbi had the rarest of gifts, expressing complex ideas in the simplest of terms. He called him a man of huge intellectual stature, but with the warmest human spirit. He was a leader in interfaith relations who maintained a relationship with popes, leaders even in the Muslim world, and was close to the former Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey. He leaves a legacy immeasurable across societies around the globe. I had 3 connections with him. First and foremost, his weekly emails with his Torah commentaries. And for me, reading his weekly commentary on the Torah portion was a central part of my Shabbat ritual. His analysis of each parsha, which I read and reread every single year, were beautifully written, always moving, and transformed my own understanding of the parsha every week. His books. He wrote more than 25 books in his lifetime about Judaism, God, science, morality, philosophy. His most recent book, I just finished a few weeks ago, and I highly recommend it, entitled Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times. And last, but certainly not least, his videos. He put together 3, 4, 5-minute videos, and as Prime Minister Tony Blair mentioned, he would take the most complex ideas and put them in the most simplest of terms. And those videos were so effective that I would even show them to our young here in our religious school and day school. I enjoyed the wisdom and the way he connected Old and New texts and showed how Judaism is respected. And his authentic Torah and his world-class intellectual span allowed him to teach, to impart, and to inspire. He embodied the idea from the psalmist, Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, that the soul of man can be a light of God. And he took that light and fanned it into a flame that brought the light of Judaism across the globe. And while none of us will be able to read new commentaries every week from him, the values and lessons that we learn from him can still stay with us forever. There are new lessons we can draw from his teachings. And this morning I want to share one that I believe can help us, especially during these divided times. how we as Jews view time. In a Torah commentary on the book we're now reading, Bereshit, Rabbi Sachs reminds us that our tradition tells stories in a very unique way, unlike any other religion and unlike any other civilization that has ever existed on the face of this planet. He wrote that we as Jews have a form of story that is rare indeed, of which our Hebrew Bible is the supreme example. It's a story without an ending, which looks forward to an open future rather than reaching closure. It defies narrative convention. As Westerners, as Americans, we normally expect a story to create a tension that's resolved on the final page. That's what gives art a sense of completion. We don't expect a sculpture to be incomplete, a poem to break off halfway, a novel to end in the middle. The only time that really happens nowadays is at the end of an episode on Netflix. They purposely do that so you watch the next episode. But that's rare indeed. Yet that's what the Hebrew Bible repeatedly does. Consider the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses. As we're now reading, the Jewish story begins with the repeated promise to Abraham that he'll inherit the land of Canaan. Yet by the time we reach the end of Deuteronomy, the Israelites still haven't gone into that land. They haven't crossed the Jordan. The Chumash ends with the moving scene of Moses on Mount Nebo seeing that land, to which he has journeyed for 40 years, but doesn't get to enter. Nevi'im, the second part of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, ends with the prophet Malachi foreseeing the distant future. But we're not there yet. He prophesizes that we'll get there, but we look forward to a time not yet reached. In the third book, Ketuvim, the final section ends with King Cyrus of Persia granting our people, the Jewish exiles in Babylon, the ability to return to the land and rebuild the temple. But we don't see that in the Tanakh. None of these is ending in a conventional sense. No completion whatsoever. Each leaves us, the readers, with a sense of promise not yet fulfilled, a task not yet completed, a future seen from afar, but not yet reached. Judaism is the only civilization whose golden age is in the future. And it was this revolutionary concept of time based on human freedom that Judaism contributed to the world. Many ancient cultures believed in cyclical time, in which all things return to their beginning. The Greeks, they developed a sense of tragic time, in which the ship of dreams is destined to founder on the hard rocks of reality. Europe of the Enlightenment introduced the idea of linear time, with its close cousin, progress. But Judaism believes in covenantal time. Well described by the historian Harold Fish, the covenant is a condition of our existence in time. We cooperate with its purposes, never quite knowing where it will take us. In a lovely phrase, he speaks of the Jewish imagination as shaped by the unappeased memory of a future still to be fulfilled. Tragedy gives rise to pessimism. Cyclical time leads to acceptance. Linear time begets optimism, but covenantal time, Jewish time, gives birth to hope. As Rabbi Sachs taught, these are just not different emotions. They're radically different ways of relating to life in the universe. And they're expressed in different kinds of story, in different types of narratives that our people have told for centuries. Jewish time always faces an open future. Jewish time always has a last chapter that's not yet written. The Messiah has not yet come. And until then, the Jewish story and the story of humankind continues and continues until we together with God are the co-authors of the next chapter. My friends, as last week's election demonstrated to us again, we're more divided than ever. We're still in the midst of a great pandemic, and our economy has a long road to recovery. Yet the Messiah will still come. We can remain hopeful in an open future. But until then, things will never be perfect. We'll never be in a country where most people in Montrose will be in lockstep agreement with most of the people who live in Baytown. It's been said that the hardening of the woke dogmatism on the extreme left and the nationalism on the extreme right, all baked in a Twitter stew, generates more heat than light and often claims dignity as its first casualty. I know the era of President Ronald Reagan and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill sharing a drink after hours is long over. But we've gone so far that partisanship has collapsed into the politics of obstruction and personal destruction. We can do better. And we as Jews can all help us get to a better place. Jonathan Sacks often warned us that he often reminded us that we encounter God in the face of the stranger is a reminder that's urgently needed after a political season in which, more than ever, we have become alien to each other and distorted to people who may just simply disagree with our politics. As Rabbi Sacks taught in his book, The Dignity of Difference, if everyone thinks the same thing, there's nothing to say. But if everyone always argues, no one can hear anything. Can opposing ideologies commit to pluralism, even when they can consider themselves to be absolutely true? And can we as Americans, as American Jews, with this great idea behind us, thousands of years of Jewish wisdom, keep working towards a civility where this can occur again, knowing it will never be perfect? Yes, we may never reach the promised land, yet we never give up. It's probably the reason why we as Jews are still here. It's that idea of looking forward to the future that begets hope, no matter the circumstances. It's probably the number one reason why we as Jews still thrive and flourish. We as Jews have always kept working for perfection, knowing that we may never get there, but we don't give up. And for centuries, we have worked and worked and worked so that the Messiah would come, knowing that we may never see him in our lifetime, but we don't give up. That's Jewish time. And that's what Rabbi Sacks often reminded all of us. He was by nature an optimist, and I know he would have been even more comforting right now, but his teachings can still be so. Several years ago, he wrote the following: I am a Jew because I have heard the call to add my chapter to its unfinished story. I am a Jew because of the dreams and hopes of my ancestors live on in me, and I am the guardian of their trusts, now and for the future. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope. This week in our Torah portion, the biblical Abraham and the biblical Sarah both die, and their legacies begin. And blessed by the Abraham and Sarah of old, can we venture forward, and now guided by another gifted legacy, that of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, a blessed memory. Shabbat Shalom.